Herbert's 100 harem. He held his breath as the chitinous black predator moved above him. She could smell him, but this close, his scent was overpowering and she couldn't pin him down any more thoroughly than in this building. Both soft and hard, rounded and razor-sharp, she was built to hunt down impertinent beings like him. On all six she slunk into the chamber, her long tail tipped with a brutal blade waving slightly as she scanned the area with the massively powerful sensory organ within her elongated black skull. She was looking for him, and if he fell even somewhat within her cone of vision, or if he had even passed within it recently enough to leave a trail of body heat, then he would be found. Unfortunately for her, he was literally right under her. As in, if she moved back even a little or had faltered in her step even slightly, she would have freaking stepped on him. Of course, at this range, it also meant that any Axiom shenanigans on his part would have him instantly discovered. But that's not all that much of a penalty when it's a date at Defenestration Nation, a big game where he honed his stealth abilities and they got better at hunting. A win-win to say the least. Then her communicator goes off and she groans audibly. She pulls it out of a pocket tied to her leg without looking down, leading Herbert to wonder just how surreal this is getting. She activates it in a projection mode to show a holographic image of another Zayden. "Hello, Grandma, it's so good to see you." "It's wonderful to see you too, especially having such fun with your husband." Isma coos at Emira, who gives off the shades of confusion along her Axiom patterns. Isma points down, prompting her to look. "Way to spoil the fun old timer. My scent is saturating the area and I was under her line of sight and making no noise." Herbert complains but has an enormous smile on his face. Consider it a lesson in advanced stealth. Sometimes you simply have rotten luck and need to improvise. "So, what's your plan?" "Well, first I pay the penalty and then I'm going to vanish," Herbert says. "And that penalty would be woo?" Isma begins to ask as Herbert rises up, then kisses her granddaughter full in the mouth and starts to feel all over her. Emira reacts big time, picking him up with her 3 free hands and pulling him close even as his hands get under her bra to give her breasts some attention. The blatant makeout and groping session continues even as Emira wraps her tail around him to bind them close, and then he leans back a bit. "You've had the taste. Catch me on your own if you want a full meal." Then probability shifts and twists as Herbert starts wrenching on the local Axiom. Reality contorts in response, and then suddenly, Emira's arms are empty and her tail is wrapped around air. "Oh, he's certainly a treat. What did I tell you? Stick to it and you'll win him over." He was wrestling with things a bit more internally, grandmother. He didn't understand how things work outside cruel space and was trying to be careful, Emira says with a smile. "But you still pushed, I hope," Isma says before biting back a laugh as Herbert reveals he hasn't gone far at all. So much so he steps over Emira's slowly uncoiling tail to watch the conversation from behind her. "If you want me to leave, just say so," he mouths out, and Isma chuckles to herself as she shakes her head. "What's so funny?" "Oh, just that I was calling to advise you to push harder on your husband to hump you down more because I very much approve of humans now," Isma says and has to fight back laughter as one of Herbert's eyebrows rises theatrically behind her still oblivious granddaughter. She's unaware that he's constantly stepping over her swaying tail to avoid revealing his location. "Really? You said you were unsure if they were all that strong with how shy Herbert was acting and needed to see what they were doing for yourself." "And I have. I've seen a human put an Apuk war princess in fear of her life. Shaymari was always a spiteful bitch, but too strong to face in open combat. Yet one of the humans here on station did it anyways. By the time the fight slammed into my home, she looked like death warmed up and he looked ready for murder. He nearly died, but I was there to help the little fellow." Although it did take a bit to figure out why a war princess would be so dedicated to the death of a man. What happened? Oh, the usual. Murder, intrigue, deception, bombs going off, and this time in the middle of it all was a small team of human bounty hunters, the leader of which pushing himself to his limit in battling a war princess to spare his crew from harm. Is it really that surprising? There's apparently a bunch of human sorcerers now, you know, those Apuk super adepts. Well, apparently humans can learn it easily, Ymira says, and Yzma tilts her head. This projector is showing the flow of axiom on her too, so Herbert can only smirk as he sees how baffled Yzma is. A light, back up, human sorcerers. That'd be Vernon. He went to prove himself outright unstoppable with axiom behind him. Herbert says, startling Ymira a little and prompting Yzma to laugh in amusement. What's going on? You were hiding right behind me? People tend not to expect that kind of nonsense, Herbert says. As for Vernon, yes, he's an axiom master, but he's fairly unique. Outside of Cruel Space, there are about 100 humans with his kind of mindset, and so far when it comes to the really over-the-top axiom shenanigans, only he and Franklin have really pulled it off. The rest tend to be more esoteric or practical. I see, anyways, just calling to let you know that any reservations I might have had of you being with a human are gone. Not that I had any to begin with, but it's best to let you know such things. After all, having the level of sheer raging gall that these humans have can only be a good thing, Yzma says. And on that note, it's time for me to start running again. The chase makes the fun at the end all the sweeter, Herbert says, taking a step backwards and falling off the edge of the building. Ymira rushes over, but he's already gone and no sign of where he might have hit the ground. Oh, I really like him. I may have to stop by for a visit sometime soon, Yzma remarks. Grandmother, no. Centris would not survive, Ymira protests. You mean you wouldn't survive? Yzma corrects in a teasing tone. Oh, young girls these days, so ashamed of their family. Grandma. Oh, what happened to my little Tailnor? Oh, it's so sad. The merciless Yzma continues as the axiom runs hard and fast over Ymira. If her species was any color other than jet black, she would be somewhere between neon pink and fluorescent red with how hard she'd be blushing. I still have the pictures, you know. I think that your husband would love to see. Goodbye, Grandma, Ymira asserts as she cuts the connection. In her mind, she can hear the ancient huntress giggling anyways. With that finished, she starts stalking and tries to figure out where the scent went. Herbert doesn't seem to be in the area as she goes up to the roof and hangs off the highest ceiling a few moments later. A bit of focus and she can effectively see through the thin walls. The trail of heat is already dissipated as his clothing locks in enough to blur the trail. A quick bit of recon around the tower has a slightly fresher scent trail leading away. She jumps up into a nearby tree and starts racing along it with all 6 limbs and scurries up to the next to top floor of the nearest building. She starts scuttling along the underside while scanning the area as much as she can. A slight trail of heat leads away and she leaps down and starts loping after the trail. The scent is stronger and stronger as she homes in on her target. She brushes by some bushes and is slammed into from the side before there's a roll that ends up with Herbert on top. Remember, if they know they're being hunted, they blur the trail. Keep trying. Then he kisses her lightly and is gone again, causing her to rise up and focus. Okay then, you want to play that way? We'll play that way. She then focuses and gets low to the ground again. Then she's up the nearest tree and craning her neck. There are several points of heat and axiom moving quickly. One of them, however, is making a point of avoiding the others. That's Herbert. She starts scuttling down and then launches herself to the nearby rooftop and races along it. Her back legs coil and launch her over to another rooftop, and she perches on the corner to rescan the area. Her cone of vision is thinner than most races, but the sheer clarity allows her to spot Herbert, and it is Herbert she's close enough to tell he's very good. He tends to stay below the sight lines of the other Zeden, but keeps a physical block between him and the Yaoya. He's clever, but the key to a good hunt is patience. With the other girls hounding him, and from what she can see, attracting the others to the area, he's going to have to leave. She races along the roofs and repositions. As more and more girls close in on the area, she repositions twice more and places herself along his escape route. She considers as the group presses down and he starts to bolt. Low to the ground at first before he hits the side of a building, goes through and then goes straight up. They're looking low, but he's up high and blitzing over the rooftops to get out of casual sight range of the Zeden after him. She takes a few moments and prepares herself as she partially hides and readies a pounce. A blur of dark blue and black starts to race by and she slams into it from the side. It carries them both into the side of a building. The wall snaps open before snapping back into place and she pins him to the ground. Thank goodness for the airbags. Airbags? Do these feel like they're full of air to you? Emira demands, pressing her breasts up against him. They're a type of, you know what? Never mind, Herbert says as he reaches around and runs his fingers down the small of her back, causing an involuntary shudder. You got the prize. Now what are you going to do with it? What am I going to do with it? What am I going to do with the prize of... Emira begins to coo just in time for every wall in the ceiling to crash open as the rest of the hunters crash the party. The sheer impact causes the floor to snap open and they fall down 2 stories and land in a heap. Herbert's hysterical laughter fades into the distance as Emira fumes and mentally counts to 10 so she can resist lashing out at her sister wives. Is there nothing he can't use to escape? Well, he's some kind of special spy or something, isn't he? Of course he's good. That's half the fun. He works in intelligence as an assistant to Sir Philip. That's not a spy, is it? Read his books. If you can read the English language, you figure out fast that the books are only half silly story, and the other half is instructions on scouting and spying and all sorts of things. You can read his books? Yes, but he doesn't know that. Yes, I do. Herbert responds and there's a scramble to find him, but he's already gone.